Thank you for joining me as we head into the third week of Lent, and we continue to have opportunities to experience God's love as an act of healing. For this week, our focus is on stories. Most people love stories. They love telling stories. They love hearing stories. And probably one of the most wonder-filled phrases in all of childhood and maybe in all of life is once upon a time. Do you agree with me? Kind of get excited, like what's going to come next? And the stories don't usually go like this. Once upon a time there were 3 little pigs and they lived happily ever after, the end. I mean, that would be a really, really boring story. Because all of us know the most important part of the story is the middle. That is where all the interesting stuff happens. It's where they're in the dark woods, or where there's giants roaming, or where the hero overcomes, or hard things happen to good people. I mean, it's where the meat of the story happens, is there in the middle. Now, tell me if any of you have ever seen one of these. I'm sure all of you had at one time seen one of these. Of course, it's a Band-Aid. It's a really big Band-Aid, but it's a Band-Aid. And have you ever had to use one? I had to use like ones this size on like my knee, maybe on my elbow. Smaller ones, have you ever had to have one? Like I have one on my thumb right now. I'm not even sure how it happened. Have you ever had to use one on your nose? Maybe your eyebrow, your forehead? Anyone ever had to have a bandage on your tongue? Probably not. That would be a really weird place to need a bandage. But whenever we get a big scrape or a small boo-boo, it always feels a little bit better to have one of these. So if you're older, you might remember when you were a kid, and maybe it still happens. Maybe a friend or a spouse does this for you, where they put the bandage on and they kiss it and make it all better, or, it's kind of like they're there. If you're one of the kids watching this, then I'm sure you remember a time where your mom or dad or, somebody that cared about you put a bandage on, and they took really good care of you, and it was like they're there, and it didn't really matter how big or small everything was. It just felt better once you had a bandage on. Well, and sometimes we wear our bandages longer than we need to. And do you want to know why I think that is? It's because the bandage tells a story. It lets everyone know that you've had a hurt and that the hurt didn't keep you down. And it tells the whole world, like, I've been through something painful, I've overcome it. And so, have you ever seen someone that had a bandage and asked them what happened? And then you felt, or maybe you had a bandage and somebody asked you what happened? And then you felt really good to be able to tell that story. Or somebody told you the story and they felt really good to be able to tell you the story. I don't know how I cut my thumb, but I found I needed a bandage today, and just being able to say, oh, I needed a bandage, I hurt myself today, I don't know how. Or sometimes you have bigger hurts, like this, where I broke my foot, and I'm wearing a big boot. So when people ask me, they see me, there's like, how's your foot doing? Or what happened? And being able to tell my story and saying like, yeah, I fell off my bike, but I'm doing better and it's getting better. That's part of my story. So what I would like you to do is if you've got a story of where you've overcome, like take a picture or post a picture, tell a little bit of the story, and put that like in the chat on Facebook, so that you could share that and share your story with everybody. And sometimes I want to also acknowledge that sometimes the hurts aren't on the outside. Sometimes the bigger hurts happen on the inside. Somebody says something that hurts our feelings, that makes us feel sad. and that it's really important to acknowledge when we've had an inside hurt, and how important it is to tell those stories too, to not just keep it inside, but to be able to say, it hurts. When you said that, it didn't feel good, or somebody told me this. So having a really good friend that you can share your hurts with, or share when you have an inside hurt, is really important. And I feel really grateful that we have each other here at Bethel to share those hurts with. So I encourage you, if you have an inside hurt that you haven't shared with somebody, to share your story, because we're here to hold each other and to lift each other up with that. And stories are really powerful too. The Bible is full of stories of God's people overcoming hard challenges. Our faith is full of stories. Our very church community is full of great stories. And if you don't know some of the stories of our church community, there are people in our community you can ask who've been around much longer than I have that could tell you some fantastic stories of Bethel. Our stories help get us through, and as we've now completed this entire year of kind of hard things, we're coming up on the year of the church having to, go to remote worship, and we've had a lot of hard things. We've had to learn things. And this next year, we're going to be continuing that process and also moving on to healing. And the story will continue of how we transitioned to online worship and then moved to a hybrid, and we overcame a lot of the obstacles, and we've had lots of mini chapters in this story and lots of ways that God has showed God's grace, and we've had that opportunity to experience God's love through this whole last year. So think about the stories of your life. Think about how they've changed you. Think about the ways that you've overcome. And if there's a story that particularly bubbles to the surface, I invite you to share that with the Bethel community. And if you are one of the Bethel sages and you have got a great Bethel story to share, please share that with all of us on the Misfits page. Have a blessed week.